Welcome to Spark Stories. You are here to listen to inspiring stories from phenomenal people who are doing the work in shifting our planet. People who, just like you, had an inner calling, a spark that needed to be birthed into the world. They are here to be examples to you of what human potential really is, to encourage you to find that thing that only you were meant to bring into this world, and to be an inspiration to look within. The epidemic of sexual abuse and harassment of women has plagued our reality since the beginning of time. The Me Too movement has brought much awareness to this problem. More and more women are coming forward in solidarity and sisterhood to heal and reclaim our bodies as our own. What we need more than ever are women who have suffered abuse to feel safe, empowered, and connected, and to be offered a platform where they will be heard and where they will inspire and guide other women to do the same, to trust, to heal, to rise. Today on Spark Stories, we have the honor of interviewing Stephannie Sloane, a woman who has survived and is now thriving after sexual abuse and drug addiction. Women have been existing in a society that until much too recently has not honored our bodies, our power, or our voice. Stephannie is here to lead the way, to show women that we are in charge and we do have a choice. Stephannie is an alcohol, drug, and substance abuse counselor. She went back to school and graduated college as an adult and got her associates in mental health and human services. She's even completed her first marathon at the age of 39. And even though she's been divorced 3 times, she still believes in love. Stephannie is a brilliant light and example of how we can take the steps today that will improve our current reality and that we are more powerful than we can possibly ever imagine, especially when we allow ourselves to accept guidance and the embracement of sisterhood. Stephannie's approach to healing for herself and her clients is straight through the middle, an approach where she invites others to radically face where they are now in order to get to where they are meant to be. She believes that everyone needs recovery, and we as women have almost all suffered forms of abuse and trauma, and there is no exclusivity when it comes for the need to heal and thrive. She believes in being authentically herself and boldly transparent so other women can witness how connected we truly are, and that together we can heal. Stephannie says, "There is no place for shame at our table. It is an uninvited guest that only leaves when you ask it to, with tools of recovery." Well, friends, today Stephannie Sloane is Spark's honored guest, and we are so excited she's here to share her story. Stephannie, you're on the Spark couch.
I'm on the Spark couch. Thank you for having me.
What an introduction. I don't personally write the introductions. We do a pre-interview, so you met with Jennifer, and then she writes the introduction, and I was reading it, and I was like, there's so much to Stephannie that I do not know. And I've known you for a couple of years, right? So
yes.
You came to Spark 2018?
I did, yes. Right after I left my 3rd marriage, yes.
Yeah, wow, the timing of everything. And then you were part of the Spark Mastermind, and Janelle had mentioned that you would be a really good fit for Spark Stories, and I got to hear just a little snapshot of where you've been in your life. And as we heard in the intro, you've been through quite a bit.
Yes.
And I think that what surprises me the most, though, Steph, is like you are one of the most exuberant, like full of life, positive people. And to hear that you've been through drug addiction and sexual abuse, I am really glad that you're here today, because I know that there's so many women that need to hear that you can go through the fire and come out and not only be good, but help other people go through the fire as well.
Yes.
So if it's okay with you, I just want to start just diving in and kind of start from the beginning. Like, where did all of this begin for you? Where did your story, I mean, you can just go back as far as you want. Okay. Where did it begin for you?
It's a good question. There's a lot of beginnings. I have been blessed with a very early memory of things, even through using substances to check out for a while. I haven't lost a lot of my memory. And so I can remember as far back as being 2 and meeting a grandfather who passed away. So most of my traumas, I wasn't a person who put them away and forgot about them. They're things that have been ever present in my life. And I had a phenomenal single mom the first 5 years. She did amazing things for me, and she had to work a lot, and she still found time and spent time with me. It's especially being a single mom now, like that's been such an incredible example for me to live by, remembering those times. And it's so funny because I talk with her, and she remembers it as one of the hardest times in her life and the messiest times. And she says things like, I was so impatient with you. And that is not at all what I remember. I remember it being the best time of my life.
My mom and I have similar conversation.
Yeah. It's a really, that sticks with me more in motherhood than most experiences with my family, because I'm able to see her perspective and know what mine was. And so I believe my kids when they tell me, things.
We have great memories.
Yeah,
Mom.
exactly. Yeah. And so when I was 5 years old, I went to a babysitter, and the son of this babysitter would sometimes be in charge of us. He was, I believe, 17, if I remember right. And when my babysitter would leave, he would sexually molest me. And I don't know about any of the other kids, but a really interesting, that's really where the pattern of me sort of giving up the power of my body started. What I remember from that experience isn't bad things. I don't remember hating it. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it.
Yeah.
I found myself trying to please the person in the situation. I believe that's when my people pleasing started. And then when I knew it was wrong, because I knew it was wrong, I remember going to my mom and then sort of trying to please her to make her feel better about what happened. And so I believe that's sort of where a lot of these patterns sort of started. And it wasn't by any fault of my mom. It was something that I started to take on at a young age. And my mom did all the right things. She called all the right authorities and reported all the right things. As a single mom, I cannot imagine what that was like for her. But so that's a little bit about where sort of I recall that pattern starting.
So much starts at early ages like that for us.
Yeah. And then just throughout my life, there were just different experiences in high school with boyfriends, with boys I liked but that weren't boyfriends, in marriages. There were choices made by the people that were asking. I use that term very loosely because it wasn't always a violent sexual assault. It was an interaction. It was a suggestion. It was a request. It was, this is what wives do. It was wanting to make my marriage work. It was wanting this boy to date me, and just learning over the years that to make you happy makes me happy. And so that sort of codependence, is part of it. Fear of rejection, being afraid of just not realizing my value, not understanding thinking that was my purpose. My purpose is to please. My purpose is to show up for the world. And that carries over into, you mentioned my joy and sort of how positive and outgoing I am. I was always positive and outgoing. I was always just wanting people to be happy and feel good and feel seen and feel heard. And so I thought that I needed to sacrifice pieces of me in order to make that happen for other people. And people for sure took advantage of that.
Yeah. Well, I think that people pleasers, because I'm recovering one as well. Mm-hmm. And I think mine started from a young age too, and of wanting my dad to, it was always involved with men. I wanted to make the acceptance of men. And I think sometimes for girls, having the absence of a father too can cause some subconscious beliefs that we want men to approve of us. And there went down that path for me. But I'm glad that you brought up the concept of there's physical, sexual trauma and abuse, but trauma with sexual patterns, it doesn't always have to be like forceful. It can also be just very bad patterns and relationships and wanting to sacrifice your happiness for somebody else's.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you first got married?
The first time I was married, I had just turned 20. My first baby was just born at 19, and a few months later we got married. Really, he's a great guy. I'm lucky. I'm lucky in having chosen this man as a father for my kids because he's been present. He always pays his child support, and he shows up for the kids, and he's there every other weekend, and he's an important part of their lives, and the relationships that they have worked on and developed over time is amazing. And what I know is that I for a long time focused on what he didn't give me, but we were also so young when we divorced that the truth just is that he and I were together so that we could have these two great humans that we have. And we were really young. We were so young. I still don't know who I am most days. And so, I have a better idea than I did at 19, but we were playing house and we tried and it didn't work. And we've both been able to parent together, which is really nice.
That is a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. So 19 with him, and then sort of leaving that marriage, I thought, gosh, I need passion. I need someone who's just can't keep their hands off me and is so excited about me and thinks I'm the greatest gift to the world. And I knew I had this list in my head of things I wanted. And so excited Stephannie, overwhelmed, goes out into the world and is ready for love, is looking for love. This is my story. And I meet this man who loves my babies like I do, who's incredibly passionate about me and my kids, and so much so he wants to show up for them like a dad, and he wants us to be a family, and he's all these things, but I'm exchanging the passion and ignoring, the red flags. I haven't had this. This feels good. This feels wanted. This feels needed. And what it ends up being is a trauma-filled relationship. And
what were those red flags?
Gosh, he didn't have a job. He wanted me. The biggest red flag is he was ready for me to move in. Within the first few months, he had a house. He had a house payment. My lease was coming up. I decided that it wasn't quite time for us to move in together yet, that I wanted to sign another 6-month lease. And he was furious that I would put him in a situation where he could lose his house. And what I told myself was things like, well, he just really wants us to live with him. And looking back, it's so obvious. And that's what I wish that more women understood, that not to be hard on themselves, because we all come out of relationships and look back and see all these red flags.
Yeah. And think, why wouldn't we make different decisions?
But the truth is we don't know until we know.
Yeah.
And then we know, and so we do something different, but we don't know. And so that, to me, that's sort of a form of shaming. Like, I should have known, but I didn't. And I wanted to be loved, and I believed in love, and he met all the things on my list. I didn't know my list needed to go.
It needed to expand a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
So you were manifesting back then.
Yes, exactly. Just not the right things yet.
Yeah.
Just not the right things. And that marriage ended more difficult. The divorce was extended out over a couple years. There was a parenting evaluation. There were a lot of accusations about drug abuse towards me, which at the time I wasn't using yet. There were some sexual assault traumas in that relationship, and we had a small child together who just suffered through the consequences of our chaos.
So you have 2 with your first marriage, and then now you have a 3rd one with this gentleman.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I left that marriage, and I was like, okay, I still believe in love.
I love the optimism.
I still believe in love. Like, I had these things to compare to, and I was thinking, these people who I see who are sad and closed off and shut down, and I just knew I didn't want to be that I felt sad for people who couldn't be open and to growth and to ideas and to new things. And so I made another list, and I met somebody else who was on that list. But in the process of creating this list, I started to drink more frequently. I started to dabble in the use of illicit substances more frequently because it was numbing so much of my pain from the trauma of the last relationship.
Yeah.
And so that became a habit. That became a habit as I went into my third marriage. He and I would go out drinking a lot. Through that experience, there was just information about that relationship that were also red flags. There were also things that they didn't add up. And that one was a little harder to put my finger on. And I feel like walking away from that now, my lesson looking back at the red flags is if it doesn't feel right, believe that.
Yeah.
Believe that. It wasn't as obvious as the red flags from before. This was a little bit harder.
What were the red flags in this relationship?
One of there were a lot of needs. There were a lot of sexual needs that I was made aware of that I wasn't meeting pretty consistently. I was very codependent, and he was very codependent. And so note that in my speaking about these relationships, I am not pointing fingers. These are just facts from my experience.
Sure.
So I want to be super clear that this isn't anyone's fault. This was my lessons through life and what I've learned looking back on it. But he was drinking a lot. He would drink by himself. He would drink at night. He didn't participate with my kids after that first initial. We moved in really quickly together. He stopped engaging with my kids. He stopped, like, all the things that were kind of for show sort of went away. As soon as I started to switch, what would happen is he loved me very much because, again, we were two codependent people, just like clung on to each other. But what happened is as soon as I started to take on this role of making it look better than it was, that should have been a huge indication to me that this wasn't right. This wasn't going to work.
Making it look better, like, to people outside of your guys' relationship.
Yeah. Like, one of my greatest strengths is my outlook on life and my ability to believe in love and believe in joy and believe in all of the things. But that's also something that has been a weapon for me as well. Like, I will pull it out and use it instead of seeking the right relationship or seeking the right behaviors or seeking the growth. I would just instead use this desire for things to look better and put that into play. So instead of like, let's work on this relationship, it became, how can I make this look better to other people?
It's like doing updates to the outside of your house. So everybody thinks your house looks nice, but inside it's kind of a hot mess.
Yeah. Facebook and Instagram highlight reel constantly. Constantly. Yes. Yeah. And that relationship took a lot of work. It took a lot out of me. And I was in addiction and he was in addiction. And then our addictions just got all mixed up and blended together. And his struggle started to bleed into mine. I had decided going into this marriage that I wasn't going to give up. This was it. This is what I committed to. This is what I want. Third time's a charm. All the things. This was it. This is who I was going to start and end with.
Is there like any feeling of like not wanting to admit that you made a mistake?
Absolutely. My second marriage, the night we moved in together, the night we finally moved in together, I cried in the shower every night for 2 weeks. But I couldn't say to anyone, I think I made a mistake. I couldn't do that. I'll gladly admit my mistakes today, but at the time I was like, I couldn't tell anyone. And then this last time, because I sort of had this secret addiction, I thought that I truly owned it. I thought that I was the problem for a long time, and that I just needed to figure my own stuff out. This was about me, that these were the secrets I was keeping.
Yeah. So if you could just fix you, everything else would be fine.
That's right. I just have to fix me.
So how far into addiction? Because I think there's people that are like, oh yeah, like maybe she was addicted to a little marijuana. Like how can you maybe dig in a little bit more to like what that looked like for you being an addict?
Sure. Yeah. So this is a good question. And a lot of people have asked, like, what was your drug of choice? And my favorite answer is more. There are things that I was addicted to when I stopped. When I got clean and sober, there are things that I was physically addicted to and experienced withdrawals from. But I believe if I talk about the specifics of what drugs I was using, then it gets lost in translation if it was just marijuana or just alcohol. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I like to avoid the specifics of what I was using. I was a very functioning addict. I went to work every day. I had a really important job in the community where I was sort of looked up to. I showed up for work. I did my job. I did things with my family. My husband didn't even know how much I was using. Wow. It was pretty deep. And so, but I was physically addicted, and I went through withdrawals for a good few weeks. I sat on my couch and experienced physical withdrawals from things. And it was just a decision one day.
You just decided
I'm done. And I did quit cold turkey, but I had the support and help of my doctor. I went to NA meetings, Narcotics Anonymous meetings. I practiced the 12 steps. I got a sponsor. I did all of those things. But it was a process. And the night that I told my husband, my then husband, was the hardest night of my life. I felt all of my shame sitting in my throat. And as I told him, I just felt released. I continued to feel so much shame for a long time until I really worked on it, but I felt released. It was an unfortunate situation in that marriage because he knew that I was using, and he knew that I was doing things that weren't healthy for me. And while he could say he didn't know how much, I'm sure that he did to a certain point, because he was using those things to sort of leverage sexual favors. If I do this for him, at one point we put me on a taper schedule to come down off of what I was addicted to. If I was willing to do this, he would give me a little bit more of this. And I'm in withdrawal.
Wow.
So I'm like, absolutely, absolutely. And that is a story that I told with so much shame and regret before. And today I would tell anybody who would listen, because I think it breaks a stigma, and I think it shows people what addiction is, because addiction is not just homeless people on the street who are choosing to give up on life. Addiction is people who are struggling with how to manage trauma or stress. And I say trauma, but I'm not talking about big events. I'm referring to things that are as little as a really overwhelmed mom who has access to medications that can help her get through the day, and that nobody would know that she was taking. So that's sort of, that was a little messy. When I stopped using and I went into treatment, he became very insecure.
He didn't have anything to hold over you anymore.
He didn't want me to go to meetings. He said he thought it was dangerous. But what was so interesting about him saying that it was dangerous was that it was never dangerous for me to go to a stranger's house and perform some sort of sexual act that was a fantasy of his. So there were situations that's when things started to add up and not make sense. The healthier I got, the unhealthier he was, but not because it was any different than it had been. It was because I was starting to get well. I was down here with him.
Yeah, you were able to see above the fog.
Yeah. And I loved him immensely through it. You know, I was with him for 4 years while I was clean, still very committed to our marriage, to making it work, to showing up, still committed to that plan. He's my forever.
You were not going to be wrong. You were
not going to be wrong. Yeah, I was not going to be wrong. This was my love story. And when I left in the middle of 2018, I knew about 2 years ago that I was going to leave. And when I left in 2018, I had this whole idea in my head that he was going to go to treatment. Like, here I was, a drug and alcohol counselor. I had this down. I knew what was going to happen. He was going to go to treatment. He was going to get help. He was going to show up for himself. And then he was going to be able to show up for our family just like I could. And in the process of looking for a new home and sort of transitioning my family before we had even moved out of the house, I received some pretty devastating information about some things that he had done to and with another woman. And I just sent a simple, it was the most powerful moment in my life. I sent, and shaking, raging, sent him a message and just said, take your stuff, leave. I will be moving out on this date. That's when you can come home. And that was the moment. That was the moment that I decided. It shifted. It was just like, I'm done. I'm not going to be, I'm going to be angry. Don't get me wrong. I was angry. I was really angry. That's about the time I met you, and I was really angry.
Yeah, I remember this period.
Mm-hmm. It was the first time I had been angry in my life, and so I had a lot of anger. I had to be the victim for a while. I had to blame other people. I had to point fingers. I knew it wasn't right, but I still needed my time to do it.
Yeah.
And then I woke up January 1st, 2019, and I said, I'm done. We were taking the boys, just me and my teenage boys to...
So that's not that long ago.
It was just a year ago. And I said, I'm all done being angry. I can't, this isn't healthy. This is going to lead me into a really dark space. I've worked too hard. I've grown too much. I took my boys to California and came back and I got right to work. And I had been doing work. I was in the mastermind.
Yeah.
I thought I was in there to work on my business, but I was in there to work on myself. I had powerful experiences with you and some of the other coaches that you had share with us. I recreated and deepened relationships with other women. And I started to map out how to trust myself. And I started to work on me. And I didn't ever know how that was going to look or what I was going to do. I just knew I had to keep doing the next right thing. And that's what we say in recovery. The thing about recovery is that it's showing up in my life as recovery from addiction, but it needs to show up in everybody's life because it's not recovery from addiction. It's teaching me how to live, how to cope, how to feel, how to process, how to engage in relationships and conversations, how to set boundaries. Everyone sort of worries about these big buzzwords like, I don't know how to set boundaries, or I think I'm doing better with boundaries, or whatever that looks like. But the truth is that when I'm doing the 12 steps, I don't have to worry about how I'll get there. I just have to go through one step at a time, one step within each step to get through the 12 steps. And it's such a beautiful experience that it only makes sense that everybody would participate in it.
This is not the first time I've heard this. I actually don't even know what the 12 steps are, but now I want to because at least a handful of people have said that the 12 steps that people go through really are like the 12 steps for life.
Yeah.
Do you know them by heart?
I don't know. I probably couldn't do it right now.
Okay. We will list them.
Because I'm a little nervous right here.
Yeah, no, I don't want to put you on the spot.
The first one really, like the first one alone is just to surrender. And what is that? To just say, shit, man, I got an issue here. That's all it is. I got an issue. I got to write out what the issue is. I got to know what the issue is. I got to look at the issue. I got to be real about it.
And there's a lot more issues than just addiction.
Yeah, absolutely. Not being happy in a relationship, an issue with food, an issue with, I hate cleaning my house. Like, I hate cooking dinner. I want to be a better cook. The thing is any goal that you come up to in life, you can approach with the 12 steps. And I don't believe the 12 steps are for everyone in recovery. I think that there are so many ways to get clean. And that's what I want to touch on too is you can grow however you grow, but you need to grow. So whether it's through Spark School or conferences with women or listening to free things on YouTube. Podcasts. Like there's so many ways to grow. Like just find your way to grow and choose to grow.
What's calling to you?
Yeah, exactly.
So at one point through this story, did you decide like, I'm actually going to help people, because you're a counselor. You help people through addiction. How did that transpire?
Yeah. So the counseling came up for me. I went back to school in 2013. I was just honestly I was burnt out on my job, but really I was getting ready to quit using drugs and drinking, and I was tired. I had been in this position since I was 22 of leading a team of 25 people. I was exhausted and I needed to focus on me and my family. And so I transitioned out of that job and into school, and I didn't know what I wanted to do yet. I had looked into this program shortly after I got clean, but you had to be clean 2 years before you could start it, and it was a 2-year program. And so I have always loved helping people. I've always loved supporting people. I always feel like who I am now is who I've always been. There's just a lot more self-trust, and there's a lot more trusting my instinct. There's a lot more self-understanding and self-respect and self-love. And so I've kind of always been the person who shows up and shows empathy and creates relationships. I wasn't great at boundaries, but that changed a few years ago. And just as I've gone through, each year of recovery, big saying in recovery is more will be revealed. And has that not ever been more true for any of our lives?
Yeah.
The more that we embark on this journey in such an honest, authentic way, the more gifts we're given to take it to the next level.
Yes.
The more gifts we're given. And can you even imagine, like, a year ago, you knew me a year ago, I was starting to be like, okay, this anger is not serving me.
Yeah.
But to be like here, to be at such peace with the men who have sexually assaulted with me, who have hurt my children, who have, like, to be at peace with them, truly. Like, I want the best for those men, because them being their best gives my kids their best. And that's not, you couldn't have told me that a year ago I was going to be here.
You have, the growth that you've been through is unbelievable. And I mean, do you feel like that part of that growth is also gained through being able to help others grow as well?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I go back to your question.
No. This is, I mean, I love everything always comes full circle.
Yeah, absolutely. So I applied for that program, and I did an internship at a local inpatient facility, and it was dreadful and horrible. I had a really hard time listening to people's traumas and not taking that home with me. And so I went back to my school advisor and said, I'm not actually going to be a drug and alcohol counselor. I can't do this. I changed my mind, and she's like, no, let's try someplace else. And there were just all these moments in life where there was a block. And I always pushed through the blocks. But during the times that I wouldn't, the universe provided someone to push me. I mean, consistently. These were just like, I was done. I was like, I'm good. I'm still going to get my degree, and I'm going to work in the field of mental health, but I can't do addiction. And she just said, I just want you to try one more place. Let's just try this place. And I ended up doing an internship there, and at the end of that, they offered me a position. And I love what I do. I love it because I get to show up for people who show up for themselves every day, even if they're still using. That doesn't matter to me. Like, they're there every day for support, for guidance, to try to do the next right thing, just like I'm doing every day too. I just have more clean time than some of them, and some of them have more time than me. And I was just having a conversation today with one of my patients, and he's like, I just need you to know that you've helped me so much with my recovery, which is great to hear, but we learn in school, we don't take super gratitude or super negativity personally. Like, it's all sort of, it just is, right? Yeah. It just is. That's not about me. It's about the work that they've done. And I got to share with him, you're doing the same thing for me and for my recovery. Like, you showing up gives me hope to keep going. I've never had a job I love going to. I love going to work. I go to work at 4:30 in the morning, which is crazy.
Holy moly.
But I love it.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I think that maybe this is a question actually. are you headed with this? Like, where do you have, what's your next thing your next right thing you're wanting to do?
So my big tagline of straight through the middle, it came from a children's book that I read as a child with my mom back in those days.
Back in the days.
Back in those days. And that's just sort of been my tagline, my mantra to get through. You know, I've never known how or what was next. I stopped looking too far down the road and I just go, okay, this is the direction I have to go, the hardest way, right through the middle of it, because you get out the other side faster. So straight through the middle is something that all my closest friends know. It's sort of just what I say, what I've always said for years and years, long before I was even using drugs. And so I interested in starting a podcast in 2020 called Straight Through the Middle, where we talk about how to go straight through the middle, because I can say that and somebody's like, but what way straight through the middle?
How do you go through the hardest thing?
Yeah. And so I just kind of taking it back around to what you were talking about. I really want people to know it's possible, that no matter how big or small your trauma is, no matter how big or small life is, even if your addiction isn't as bad as mine or is worse than mine, like, we're all the same and we're all just trying to figure it out and do our best. I would never want someone to hold back from getting help or choosing growth because they felt like their problems weren't as big as mine or weren't as big as their neighbors, or, you know, we have a way of sort of stuffing them down because it doesn't look the same as hers. Most people don't know my story, and so when I share my story, they're more like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. And so, but if I had spent my whole life comparing to, well, my stuff isn't as big as Rachel's, I would have missed all these opportunities to ask for and seek help. And so that's really the message that I'm wanting to focus on with the podcast, is just everybody needs help. We all do.
Yeah, all different levels,
Forever.
all different reasons,
Yeah.
and it may not look, like you said, look like yours, but God, I mean, there's not one single person, I think, that has not had to navigate through making mistakes.
Right.
Or through having to make a drastic change, or through some form of trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's drastic or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, straight through the middle. And you have it tattooed on your arm.
Tattooed on my arm.
I love that
so I
so
never
much.
forget. I'm always able, for a long time I had a hard time meditating because I have PTSD. And so closing my eyes or being still was hard. And so I would sit with my still eye rise and straight through the middle, and I would just look at them. And that's how I trained myself to do it. And then I was able slowly over time to close my eyes and see these in my mind with my eyes closed. And now I can do full meditations with no issues. In fact, it helps me when I'm having a PTSD attack.
Wow.
So
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I've got some on my wrist too. Look at us. We're wrist tattoo club.
We are.
What would you say to somebody who has the fear that it's too late to make a change?
Gosh. That's shame. And shame, just like you sort of talked about in my intro, shame is the uninvited guest that comes in and does not leave until you ask it to. And that's how shame shows up. And shame does not serve us. It doesn't, I don't believe it serves anything. Guilt is different from shame, and guilt is important. Guilt helps sort of lead our conscience through things and help us make decisions. But shame is the dark friend, is the dark ex-husband, is the darkness that just pulls us back down and takes us away from the opportunity of growth. It can be super overwhelming to imagine being able to move through something that's sitting on our shoulders and holding us back. But the truth is you don't need to look that far down. The way to get rid of the shame and to move through it is just to do what's next. Like, I tell my patients this, I tell my friends this, I tell my kids this. Stop trying to look at the end result. We hear that all the time.
Yeah.
Don't look down there. You have no business down there. You need to look at just what's next. So what's next? Do you need to get a Kleenex to wipe your tears? Okay, do that next. What's next? Do you need to call someone for support? What's next after that? Like, sometimes it's just tiny steps.
Yes.
But it's just what's next. Getting surrounded by the right people. Whoever that is, whether that's 12 steps or a friend or a support group or a counselor. There's just so many choices out there.
And that can be applied to so many different situations. So if somebody is going through addiction and they think they're way too late, there's no way they're going to change.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what's next?
Right.
If somebody's in a relationship that they know they shouldn't be in and leaving seems like out of the question, well, what is the one next step that you can do? Takes away the overwhelm.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so exhausting being unhappy. Like when I thought about all the times that I was sitting in something just like, oh, I have to do this forever. Like,
right?
Like it's like you got to rip the Band-Aid off. It's never too late. It's never too late. I mean, I can tell you every excuse in the book. I don't have money. I don't have the fine. No, I really don't have the fine. I didn't know how I was going to afford to live with my 2 kids on my own, but I knew I had to. And I just bought a house.
You just bought a house.
I just bought a house by myself, like a big girl, without the help of any man. Like, not that there's anything wrong with men or having men help you, but I did that. Like, and a year and a half ago, I was like, I will find a way to pay the rent because I knew I needed to do it. You decide. And then you do what's next, and you get there.
You think your positive outlook has been your biggest ally or your biggest foe?
That's a good question. My biggest ally, because I never wanted to be, I feel like one of my biggest purposes in life is to be able to show up and bring good energy to the room, and that doing that has helped keep my energy high and to keep me positive. And I've been able to do so many things because of that.
And you found love again.
I found love again. And who knows, like, I say this and like, I've learned that love is not, it doesn't have to mean forever. First of all, I found love with myself again.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really important. That's really important.
That's the greatest love of all time.
And so relieved so much stress. You know, it just, to love myself, I've been working on it my whole life. So it's not like it happened overnight. It didn't even just happen in the last couple of years. It's been a slow process since the day I decided to stop using drugs and learn a new way of life. And I just kept next leveling. And I thought every year, oh, this is it. This is the year. This is the best year. And then I'd have some big realization and next level it up more. Like, I can't believe what's available to me. And that has me so excited about what's next. But yes, I met an incredible man who is so self-sufficient. We have our own homes. We love each other. We respect each other. And my favorite thing is not just that I'm able to set boundaries with him, but that he loves me so much, he sets boundaries with me.
Nice.
And I haven't had that. I almost was offended a couple times. Like, what is that? What does that mean? But that just means he loves himself and respects himself. And he's taught me it's okay for me to do the same thing with myself. So it's been really nice. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
You guys seem really happy together.
Yeah.
And you seem really happy overall, with or without him.
Yes, I am very happy. And I mean that for sure.
And I'm sure people tell you this all the time, but you are a really good mom.
Thank you.
From what I get to see from the highlights, but also from what other people who know you closer speak about you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I adore my kids. I always knew I wanted to be a mom. We're a hot mess, all of us, but I love that my kids feel like they can be real with me. My 17-year-old just told me last night that I'm always on him and I never give him space, and he had to go for a walk. And I love that he's comfortable enough to say those things and not in a hurtful way.
Yeah.
It was just, and this morning I went home for my lunch break and made him a cup of coffee and gave him a hug, and he said, thanks for giving me some space last night. Like, we just are able to be so real with each other, and that means a lot to me.
Oh, you're doing the good work.
Thank you.
All right, last question.
Okay.
You ready for this? If you were able to give one piece of advice, and only one, and this is like a torch that you're passing on that's going to light the fire for so many people, women ahead of you, what would that one piece of advice be?
You're enough. You're enough, and you need to write every single day, I am enough, 20 times. I don't know what that means for you. I don't know what that means you need to do. I don't know what that means you need to take on. But writing I am enough every single day 20 times has empowered me to discover what that means for myself. And it's different, like that encompasses so many things. And so I am honored for the women and the men who show up and ask me to help them define that for themselves as their counselor, as their coach, but I that would be it. You're enough.
You're enough.
Absolutely.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on Spark Stories. I know that there's so many people that are going to be positively affected by hearing your story.
I hope so.
I know people in my own life who need to hear this, so thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Ooh, love you.
Love you.
All right, guys, to find out more about Stephannie, did you have a website?
Not yet, it's in progress.
All right, maybe it'll be called Straight Through the Middle. I don't know. We will keep you updated. Thank you so much for being here on another great episode of Spark Stories. We will see you next month.